For sure, man. So before we move on to Madagascar, I did read on your Mongolian trip that you made a friend, Gertrude. Do you mind
Yes.
explaining your friend that you met?
Yeah, Gertrude, the bloody chicken. Madagascar was crazy. I think people probably see as Mongolia being the big deal of the two, but I don't know, man. It's difficult. Maybe it goes to Madagascar just because it was challenge after challenge, you know? But in terms of the Gertrude story, so that was just over the halfway point. My mission was to walk from the most southern point of Madagascar to the most northern point of the island via its interior, because I didn't want to go via the beaches and the coastline. It's pretty safe there, and you don't really see a lot of Madagascar. You just see the beach resorts. Whereas the interior, no one really understands what it's like on the true interior. And to make sure that I would stay in the interior, I made it my obligation to summit the 8 highest mountains along the way. Don't know why I did that. Was hating that decision at the time, but I
Just,
did it.
make it harder.
Yeah. What's that?
Just to make it harder.
Yeah, just to make it harder. Yeah. And so, in order to summit the highest of those 8 mountains, it's tradition that the locals say you must carry yourself a living white cockerel to the peak. They say by doing this, it protects you from the witches and the bad spirits of the rainforest, something that they really believe in. They have witches in Madagascar, they tell me. So this is why I travel. I love it. So I am always about respecting the culture, no matter what it is, no matter where I go. And so I did. I found myself a white chicken. I called him Gertrude. It was a cockerel. And I do realize I gave him a girl's name. And off we went. Gertrude was with me for over 2.5 weeks. He summited 3 mountains in total, because we had 2 mountains to summit before we made the highest one, and we wouldn't come across another community that could offer us a white chicken. And he had 2.5 weeks. We looked after him, we fed him, we gave him water. He became domesticated, almost like a dog. We wouldn't need to tie him up. We would put him in the rucksack if he got lazy, which a lot of the times he did. And he would stick by us. There was this one community that we came across, right? And I put Gertrude in the chicken pen. I thought, go make some friends. And anyway, we were sleeping inside the hut. Me, Max, who was my guide, Suzanne, who was my photographer, who joined me for a few weeks, and her porter called Leva. And so the 4 of us were sleeping in this mud hut, if you like. And by the morning, we saw that Gertrude perched himself. He managed to escape his pen, his chicken pen, work his way across the courtyard to sleep with us. He missed us that much. He was so used to human activity after those couple of weeks that he wasn't leaving us, and he hated being with other chickens. He wanted to be with the humans. I took a video of that. I couldn't believe it. I was filming saying, it's a bloody chicken. It's managed to escape its chicken pen. It's found its way to our mud hut, and it's now sleeping with us perched up on the windowsill. I was just like, that's crazy. So, but yeah, and then we set him free on the peak of the mountain called Maramakocho. I was hoping he would make it back down. I can't take him. I can't voluntarily take him because the locals say that we'd be bringing those bad witches and spirits to the community. So I had to leave him on the peak and say goodbye and walk back down. But who knows? Maybe he survived.
I'm assuming it
Peak of
worked.
the
You didn't
mountain.
run into any witches or bad spirits, right? So
It definitely
Yeah,
worked.
that's
did a job,
100%
didn't you?
effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And a funny story happened actually when we were sleeping in one of the huts. My story is that I woke up in the middle of the night, and Max, my guide, walked into the hut with his machete and a head torch. And I said, whoa, what are you doing? And he says, oh, nothing, just go back to sleep. And he went back to sleep. So I went back to sleep. His story is he woke up in the middle of the night. Bearing in mind, we were in a little mud hut right now in the middle of the jungle, high up in the mountains, where we came across a community that wasn't even on the map, in the middle of nowhere. Madagascar is a massive island, 4th biggest island in the world. And his story was he woke up, he looked to his right where Suzanne, me, and Leva were sleeping. And apparently he said we were all convulsing in our sleep. We were all shaking, eyes sort of rolled into the back of our heads. He said he looked to the door, which is sort of like a cracked door, typical haunted movie style door. And he said that there was a lady stood on the outside. And then he shouted, "Oi!" He woke up, he stood up, got his machete, and then she gave a little laugh and ran away. he ran after her, and he was running for about 100 meters. He's a fast runner as well. And as they entered the jungle, apparently she just vanished. And when he came back to the wooden hut, he said, "You had all stopped convulsing, and that's when you woke up, Ash, to say, 'What are you doing?'" And I was like, what? So I was the only one there trying to think of a rational, reason as to what happened, whilst everyone's like, no, you're wrong, Ash. It was a witch. The witch cast you under a spell. And I'm like, come on, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah. And the reason that I wasn't convulsing in my sleep, this is what Max is telling me, my guide who chased the witch with a machete, is because Gertrude was sleeping right next to me.
Oh man. A close friend of our podcast is this amateur ethnobotanist who talks about how psychoactive drugs relate to culture around the world, and almost every culture seems to have a plant they ingest in some form that, for whatever reason, whether it's medicinal reasons or spiritual reasons, do they in Madagascar have a specific plant that you know of?
They would have their alcohol. In terms of plants, I do know that I'm sure they've made it illegal out there in most places, but of course the proper bushmen, the tribes living out there possibly do. I never tried any, but I know that they will certainly have their certain plants that do that to them for sure. And that could be a big part of it. They all seemed to have witch stories, and they just believed it so much that, it was just like, whoa. What was funny that night as well, I had a really bad dream, and I remember saying I had an awful dream last night, and Leva and Suzanne said that they too had a really bad dream. So it was crazy. It was like, wow. And then at the same time, I'm thinking, well, where did the idea of carrying a white chicken come from? Surely that came from somewhere. And I'm like, maybe it's crazy, isn't it? Because when I'm out there and I'm with them guys, I'm just like, wow, the world is a crazy place. Who knows, especially in the depths of the jungles of Madagascar. And so I'm laughing, thinking of a rational decision, and they're sort of laughing at me for not believing in it. And I'm just like, whoa, talk about, a whole community against one person. And but Suzanne was a photographer from Brussels, so she joined me for 3 weeks. And after that, she was really spooked out. She never slept in her own tent again. She was always sleeping in Max and Leva's tent just because she was spooked.
Huh.
Crazy though, eh? Crazy. So a lot of stories, and I don't think I managed to get that one on the Joe Rogan podcast either. So I think that's a story not many people know of. It's in the book, but there you go. Yeah, a witch story.
That's remarkable, man. Yeah. So I'm trying to have understand what it was like for you to be in the middle of a jungle island that not many Westerners visit. The people you're with believe in witches and spirits. And here you are, just tucked away, walking through it. What was the jungle itself like?
The jungle was a nightmare. Very, very difficult. Machete in hand, sort of no paths, no real tracks, even to the peaks of the summits. These summits, they're not your Everests. They're not popular ones that people pay a lot of money to go up and climb. These are just mountains that no one really cares about climbing because they're not big. They're only like 2.5 to 3,000 meters, but they're jungle. So it's, jungle on its own is a challenge, and then mountains on their own is a challenge. You merge them to be mountainous jungles, and you're sort of hacking whilst you're climbing. Forget your technical climbing. You're a machete in hand climbing up through the bushes, sort of hacking away at the bamboo. You've got leeches falling off the canopy. They would drop down your shirt. You take your shirt off, and you'd have to apply these 6-7 leeches and flick them out the tent. You've got spiders, so the spiders would drop down. One spider dropped down my shirt, and it bit me in 2 different locations, as it tried to exit my top. So that became all infected. I came across aloe vera plants and and managed to cover my infections with them. I was being stabbed by the bamboo. We were all cut. It was the cyclone season as well, so not only were we climbing mountainous jungles, but it was the cyclone season, so it was all flooded. Rivers were bigger, streams were bigger. It was a lot cold. It was weirdly cold as well. Nothing dried, so you're sleeping wet, you're walking wet, you're sort of hunting and gathering because you're not coming across many locals. So we would hunt for little 10-rec rodents, or we would gather sugarcane or mangoes or any coconuts if we were lucky to come across any. And it was just real tough. And that's where I learned a harsh lesson there, but a lesson that I think is true in life in general, is that we got to a point where we hated it, just didn't want to be there. And we lost all motivation. But it was at that point we realized that, we can't always be motivated, but we can be disciplined. And it was with discipline that we just continued to get up. We had to take the hacking in turn because we'd get blisters on our hands from the machete. We would walk for 12 to 14 hours and only cover a distance of maybe 3 miles. And so, we stayed disciplined, continued to get up, continued to hack until eventually we made it out of the jungle. Like, even if some of the locals that we came across up there, we would see a community in the distance. And if we arrived at that community, it was like they saw us before we saw them, and they abandoned the community. They were scared because it was, of course, a Westerner there. And they could see us, but we couldn't see them. They were hiding in the bush and they wouldn't come out until we left. So maybe I think for the young generation, or maybe for that generation of that community, it was maybe their first time ever seeing a Westerner. Because when the French ruled over 60 years ago, the French were quite brutal in the outback. So I think that generation that freaked out were probably left with quite dark and negative stories from their great-grandparents or grandparents on how the Westerners used to be pretty brutal towards them. So they are only relating their ancestors' stories. Now they're seeing me. Their first reaction is, let's get the heck out of here.
Dude, you're lucky they didn't kill you.
Yeah, pretty much, in a way, yeah. I think when the French went there last time, though, they had guns, whereas the locals, they don't have guns up there in the jungle. And so, they just escaped, just got on out there, which is a shame. Sometimes they were really freaked out. They would shake, but sometimes they wouldn't run. And I just did my best to smile, leave them with gifts, leave them with something, just to try to let them know really that the world's moved on. It's not the same as it was back then. Right. So I'd always feel a sense of pride after, thinking that hopefully I've changed their perspective, because they're not connected really. There's even stories that the tribes or the communities high up in the mountainous jungles, they don't even converse with the communities further down or on the coastline. And if Malagasy that they don't know do approach their community, they are very on edge and very nervous, and they just don't like them there. So they try to shoo them off too, which is crazy for Madagascar. Like, yes, maybe Papua New Guinea or the Amazon, but I was warned about Madagascar, but it's one thing hearing about it and another thing experiencing it. It was mind-boggling, but amazing at the same time to think that there are still places out there. The people say that the world's a small place, but I believe that's only if you're on the usual track. Once you're off that beaten track, you'll soon realize that the world is massive.
Wow. Did you pick up that smiling is universal for, like, I come in peace?
100%. Yeah. Okay. I've always been a smiley character. Naturally, I never really stopped smiling. And when I spoke to the previous guy who tried walking across Mongolia 3 times, he said that he had never been invited into a gur, by the nomads. And I thought, that's weird. And I prepared myself for that, thinking, wow, okay, maybe they're not so hospitable. But when I went out there, I was invited in endlessly by the locals. They were asking me to stay. They would chase me on a horse just to give me a cup of tea to take away, a bottle of chai, which is their sort of tea. And they were always so welcoming. And I think the difference is he's a Navy soldier, a desert explorer. He's quite a serious guy, potentially, like a really nice guy, but he looks like the Jason Statham type character.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't really imagine him, I don't know, I could be wrong, but breaking a smile. Whereas I'm easy approachable. I like to feel that people don't feel threatened, of course. And, when I gave off a smile, the locals would smile back. They would almost feel that I'm not there to cause them harm. I'm not threatening or intimidating. And they would invite me in just because I'm smiling, just because, I'm waving. And so maybe that was the difference